A couple of weeks ago, my cousin and his friend went out in our kayaks for a day of fishing and relaxing. It is early spring, so it was our first time out this year. Being something we did, my cousin and I noticed friend, it was his first time out almost on a weekly occasion. The last couple of years, the weather was really nice. The pond we went out on is called the Great Island Pond, aptly named for the 2-acre island located directly in the center. On this island is an abandoned hunting lodge. From what locals have told me, it was used until sometime in the 1970s. The area has all new housing developments neighborhoods, but this was a remote place back in the day. My cousin and I often stopped in our kayaks and walked through the house at some point during each kayak trip. It's a rather large house with 3 floors, a wraparound deck on the 2nd floor, and an absolutely beautiful view of the pond and woods. Having been there many times, we know how everything inside is set up. Getting back to the story. We got out of our kayaks and explained the house and its layout, where to step and where not to step to our guests and first-time kayakers. After we were through, we went up the stairs and into the kitchen, checking out the old well pumps and retro refrigerator. Not 10 seconds into entering the house, we heard a loud walking or running sound from upstairs, and we all stopped and listened to sounds like a person walking or a large animal because it was very loud. There was no way a squirrel or raccoon weighed enough to make those loud steps. We were a little freaked out. But being 320-somethings, we shrugged it off and acted like we were not worried at all. The next thing we did was cut through the parlor to get out to the front deck and show our buddy the tremendous outside view. While walking through the room, my cousin and I stopped and looked at each other. He asked me exactly what I was just about to ask him. Why is the door of stairs closed? The door had never been closed during any of the previous visits to the house. And it is something that we both noticed immediately. The place has no wind because all the doors are in permanently closed positions or are stuck where they are. We continued to the porch and hung out for just a couple of minutes, taking pictures and enjoying the view. We walked back inside to check the rest of the house, and as we walked back across the parlor, the closed door that leads upstairs flings open hard enough to leave a dent in the wall. We ran into the house back to the front yard. We were all visibly shaken up trying to figure out how that could have happened. There was no wind that day. All the other doors were closed, and the door that opened was clipped shut when we first saw it. After about 5 minutes of deciding if we should go back in, we did exactly that. We went upstairs and could not find a single living soul. Not even a scared animal. We were absolutely dumbfounded. It was an exciting and confusing pit stop during our most relaxing day. One other thing that happened to me recently was I was lying on my back in bed, trying to fall asleep to no avail. For some reason, I felt the need to open my eyes, which was never really happening to me before. At least not that I can remember. I saw this misty pattern moving across on my ceiling. It was black, but had some colors in it. It was moving around in one general area directly above me. I had this weird feeling in my body as well. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on, so I woke up my girlfriend who was next to me and asked if she could see it. She said she couldn't. But I was looking right at it. I closed my eyes and waited a few more minutes. Opened them again, only to see the exact same thing. Eventually, I fell asleep and I must have just brought it up to random people, because what could this be? Am I going crazy? I don't feel like I am though. Maybe somebody in the swamp will know what I saw. The Mammoth Cave River, by book-length thriller. Few years ago, my friends and I went on a 45-mile 3-night camping trip and kayaking trip down the Green River in Kentucky, which runs above the Mammoth Cave System, the world's largest known cave system with more than 400 miles of survey passageways. We brought everything we needed in our kayaks and one canoe, food, tents, water filtration, etc. We camped each night on the riverbank when it started getting dark, and we found a level enough ground. The first night was rather uneventful, except to say that there is nothing like a wall of fireflies against a mountainous black tree line at night in the middle of nowhere. the second day around sunset. After a long day of kayaking and baking in the July heat, we came upon a stream on the bank that opened up into a large ravine. As we discovered, the stream was a cave spring pouring cold the blue cave water into a lagoon about 30 feet wide, and it was absolutely beautiful. The water was so profound that the blue water turned to black after only a few feet because of the sand in the rocks. The lagoon had a long sandy beach, secluded by hills on either side and a tall, overhanging cliff behind us. It was beautiful and like an otherworldly place. While we were there, time felt like it was moving slowly. We decided to camp there for the night. The sand was soft, white, and very fine. Ideal for ground sleeping. The place deeply frightened me, but I didn't speak up. We were all tired and everyone was having fun. We built a small fire and enjoyed the stars through the leaf canopy. Before everyone went to bed, I slept hard at night. Sometime around 5 a.m. I woke up to relieve myself. It was still fairly dark outside. I had the tent door zipper about halfway opened and had just popped my head out when I heard a loud and terrible scream. I immediately recoiled back into the tendons closed and I waited. Near the dwindling fire. The cry came about 10 feet from my left. It was high-pitched, but not like an owl screech. Although I'm not ruling that out. It was a wretched pain scream that got lower pitched as it went toward the end. Being that we were in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky. Most likely it was some sort of fox or boar, or maybe even a bird. Whatever it was, I laid awake for an hour listening. I heard absolutely nothing in return. Granted, we were on a soft beach, but I didn't hear a single twig snap or leaf crinkle when whatever it was finally shuffled away. It was bizarre. At this time, up the beach and off to the side of the lagoon was a small dry cave opening maybe 3 feet wide. I cannot say with any certainty that is where some sort of ancient cave-dwelling creature lives, or whatever, and decided to investigate our camp. But I somehow feel like it's connected. I fell asleep eventually, by the grace of God, and awoke the following day absolutely shaken. They asked my friends who were the terrible scream, but apparently no one had. We pressed on down the Green River further. The third night at dusk, we came upon a larger rocky beach. We pulled our boats ashore and decided this would have to do as we wanted to avoid going further downriver and risk being stuck on the water in the dark. The rocky beach was where the river split in two. In the middle formed a collection of pale rocks, tall grass, and dried out wood. A lonely pile of muck the size of a football field. The land mass was covered in jumping sand spiders and tiny frogs. Again, otherworldly. We sort of camp ate it all went to bed around the same time. It was silent for about 20 or 30 minutes. I was asleep as the others most likely were as well. Suddenly my dream was interrupted by what sounded like a booming, loud mechanical wooden beast. I awoke and shot straight up. It was indeed the loudest thing I've ever heard. It sounded like a massive bulldozer tearing down a colossal steel and wooded building. Then came a boom, followed by this echo throughout the entire river valley. The animal shifted, the birds flew away. We were all awoken by the crash and yelling at confusion at each other in our tents. Silence followed outside our tents. No one was particularly willing to shine a flashlight toward the woods. And eventually, we all decided it was just a falling tree and went back to sleep. The following day, I thought about it some more. Damn sure, didn't sound like some sort of falling tree. I must stress that had a metallic quality and was projected purposefully, it almost sounded like a roar. In the morning light, we found no evidence of anything out of the ordinary, nor any prominent fallen trees that could have made such a loud noise. So we packed up, headed out onto the river one last time and got the heck out of there. My friends and I still talk about that trip and all the weird things that happen. We did the same kayak trip a couple of years later, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. No mysterious forest noises. And to my disappointment, nothing more scary. The Scary Story with My Dogs, by Clear Patient 4390. They experienced what I can only imagine is an otherworldly occurrence. When I moved to the Sierra Nevada, about 4 years ago, I had been living in the South Lake of Tahoe, California area for many years and spent a decent amount of time in the outdoors, hiking, camping, and generally enjoying the beautiful place I was lucky enough to call home. Now, I don't get scared quickly. I'm used to being by myself and I carry weapons everywhere I go. Being a 5'2" and 110-pound female, I go out of my way to be sure I can protect myself. Many people in the outdoor community told me about being careful on the trails in the forest. I usually do these things alone save for my trusty worry, though somewhat cowardly dog, but I had never felt as uncomfortable, confused, and downright afraid as I did in my apartment. One night when I finally relocated away from Tahoe to Reno, Nevada, I had moved to Reno to escape the isolation of living in Lake Tahoe, and though it is only about 60 miles away, it felt like a whole different world. Now the city itself isn't necessarily huge, and I was living in the north end of town surrounded by high desert foothills and somewhat sparsely populated compared to more of the urban city center. Still, I never felt like I was out in the boonies or anything. I lived alone with my papa, and we liked our little apartment. So to set the scene here, it was early fall and the sun was beginning to develop at a much earlier time of day, which was exemplified by the fact that the city sits in a valley, so sunset seems to approach much faster than in other places in northern Nevada. My apartment's that just above street level with a window in the kitchen next to my stacked washer and dryer that looked out into an alley, maybe about 10 feet above the small street beside the small fourplex building. It was dark outside, and I was alone with my dog doing laundry. My apartment layout was an open concept in the living room/kitchen area was separated by a wall that had a vast space cut out into it. So you could walk through and see each other with the washer and dryer tucked around and the aforementioned window to the left of that. With the openness of the space, the darkness outside, and the number of overall windows the apartment had, it almost felt like you were in a spotlight. If it was dark out and I had the lights on, it looked like I was living in a fishbowl or a terrarium. Anyone or anything could see right in. I made it a point to permanently close my blinds save for the small window looking out to the alley. I didn't mind keeping those blinds open because I liked the fresh air, and someone would need a ladder to reach me if they had been determined enough. As I was removing the clothing from the dryer and turning to plop it on my couch to begin folding, I realized my dog was acting incredibly strange. He didn't want to cross the line, so to speak, from my living room to the kitchen, marked by a change from the carpet to tile. Though it was only a few steps, he seemed incredibly hesitant and began whining and burping out small concerned wolves. At first, I just thought he was anxious. For whatever reason, he is known to be a bit of a weenie. But then out of nowhere I sensed this immense and insurmountable feeling of dread and displacement. I turned my back to the washer-dryer and small alley-facing window. My dog sat facing me, almost looking past me, and his apparent anxiety and frustration began to build as I was asking him what was wrong. He started barking a whole alarm bark at this point. And as soon as he did, the sense that someone or something was observing me took over me and caused my blood to run cold. My logical response was someone was just watching me through the window, the only window that has open blinds, and the only window that anyone could see me through. So in one fell swoop, I reached for the overhead drawstring for the light and turned it off and faced the window, confronting whoever or whatever was intruding on my life. As soon as the light clicked off and the room was dark, I saw what I could only describe as a perfectly round light about the size of a small cantaloupe directly across from me on the other side of the window. It didn't glow like a lamp or a light, though its edges were perfect, and it didn't hover or vibrate or even move. At this point, I was too stunned to move, and my fight or flight response had engaged so quickly that I had no time to recognize or rationalize what I was seeing. I was looking at this thing, and it was looking back. I felt cold and confused. My hair was standing on, and my heart was racing. My dog had gone into complete freakout mode and was jumping and barking and generally causing a stir in the living room. As he could see all of this as well, the light seemed to now realize that I could see it, and it looked as if it backed away, or at least grew more diminutive in size. It had moved to the right of the window now. It flickered twice and then disappeared. It didn't buzz away or fly away, and it didn't zoom at a vision. It was visible, not visible. and then just gone. As soon as I realized the light was not there anymore, I opened the window and poked my head out to see what was going on. Maybe someone was up at my window with a flashlight. Perhaps someone in the neighboring buildings had seen something and would be checking for themselves to try and solve this odd mystery. Nothing, not a soul, and what felt like deafening quiet was all I heard. I closed the window. As soon as I shut the window, I hear a solid 3 knocks on the larger window out front by the living room. As I mentioned before, those blinds are closed, and though from the outside looking in, it's entirely clear someone was home because the lights were on in that room. No one can know it was me alone in my apartment, right? I wasn't expecting anyone over, and it was too late for solicitors. No one had any reason to be at my house then, and I was not going to open that door. My dog had rushed to the kitchen as soon as the light outside the window had disappeared. And then he was in what I can only describe full-on defense mode, and my dog is an absolute worse. I've seen him run from cats and get spooked by bags blowing in the street, and he generally stays by my side on hikes while we're camping. Because normally, he expects me to protect him. This pup seemed ready for war, though, hackles up, eyes alert, growling at the front window now. I stepped into the living room, grabbed my gun with one hand and keys with the other, and slinked back into the kitchen and out the back door to where my car was parked. I threw my dog in, started it up, and raced off to a restaurant across town where I ordered to-go food and ate in the front of my Subaru. We car camped in a Walmart parking lot that night. I returned to the apartment the following day, my laundry still on the couch with no apparent signs of anyone trying to enter the place. Everything seemed normal. I never experienced any disruption in that place ever again for the 1.5 years that I lived there afterward. I have no idea to this day what I experienced. It wasn't until I shared the story with some friends that have heard that knocking in the sense of being watched was somewhat common of a phenomenon to people who encounter skinwalkers. I've been a big fan of the channel for some time, and I never thought I would have a story worthy to send in. But recently, something reminded me of an incident of when I was around 13. It's easily one of the craziest and scariest experiences I've gone through to date, though I try not to think about it. Although if you are triggered by animals getting hurt, I suggest that you don't listen to this story and skip to the next one. Before I get into it, I thought I'd give you a little context. In the years prior, my mom adopted a little 4-year-old pit bull mix rescue named Mabel. She's the sweetest, most playful dog you could ever meet and love the company of other dogs. And after about a year, she decided she wanted to keep Maple company since she was working and adopted another rescue named Lola. We weren't sure about her breed, but her age and face structure were similar. She was overweight and slightly territorial regarding toys and food and things other dogs would like to do, but other than that she was just a little couch potato. When we first got her, we tried to introduce the dogs to each other to avoid conflict slowly. At first, it was going rather well. So after about a year without incident, they seemed to be okay around each other and didn't mind each other's company. At this time, my sister, my mom, her boyfriend, and his 2 kids took a trip to Florida, a small coastal town in the Gulf of Mexico. We would usually go to a beach house my family owned, but I had been destroyed during a hurricane, so we settled on renting a small home just 10 minutes up the road on the same beach. We took the dogs out because Mabel enjoyed splashing around in the water. One day, around 3 days into our week-long trip, we were having a good time at the beach. Maple's just sniffing around, and Lola, a little overweight for a dog, is just nestled down into the sand next to my mom and her boyfriend in their chairs. I'm not so sure what I was doing exactly, but I just remember hearing the deepest, most guttural growl, and then my mom screamed. I whipped my head around to see the dogs snapping at each other and baring their teeth. Then all of a sudden, Lola's jaws were locked around Maple's neck and head area. And she's not letting go. They're both deep growling. It was just the most intense situation I've ever experienced. I started rushing over to break it up, even though I had no idea what I could possibly do. Before it could get there though, my mom's boyfriend jumped in an attempt to break them apart, not wanting to hurt them. He attempts the wheelbarrow method, essentially lifting the dog into the air and turning them sideways onto their back while in the mood to get them to release their bite. Meanwhile, I'm ashamed to say I was frozen in fear. My mom and sister were just hysterical. But thank the Lord it worked. Lola immediately released her grip and let Mabel go. After separating, we checked to ensure they weren't hurt. Neither dog was really super hurt besides a few bites of scratches. Thankfully, there were no deep wounds or punctures. We still rushed them to events, and they were both okay and sent home with some antibiotic cream and pain that the vet said that the territorialism was common for new dogs being introduced into a household, especially for those who are not puppies. We can partially blame ourselves for not keeping a closer eye on them. But we did think at that point, they were pretty much acclimated with each other, but I guess you can never be too careful. They've got an excellent sisterly bond from cuddling on the couch, sharing toys, and all that good stuff. It's been a couple of years since this happened, and it seems like they are now friends, and it still astounds me how quickly dogs' primal instincts can kick in though, take over their body, and they forget all about the happiness and fun times, and it's all about the red. I know this might not be the typical horror story you share, and maybe it's not a horror story at all. But I did want to share this with everybody.